Welcome to the OK, Let's Learn podcast. This is two podcasts in one where we dive into great books and stories, and another one where we learn tons of different topics each and every day. My name is Kevin O'Keefe. So today, OK, let's learn and continue reading. In our OK Book Club series, let's get back to the book by Cynthia Lord, Because of the Rabbit. This is Book 6, Episode 3, and this is important with our book club series. Before you listen to the podcast, you want to read from page 66 through page 102. This is what we're going to talk about. And as we get back here with Emma, she is going to school. And it's her first day, and she's heading into the cafeteria. Now, obviously, you ideally want to listen to episode 1 and 2 to follow along and to read the book with us. But if this is your first time visiting us, you've got this girl, Emma is going to school for the first time, a real school. She's in 5th grade, and she's been homeschooled her whole life. And yes, what did she find? Her father's a game warden, and they found a rabbit. And it was just like the day before she was going to school, and they are temporarily, we don't know yet, but they've taken in the rabbit. They went to a shelter and seen if anybody had lost a rabbit, and nobody yet had lost the rabbit. So the idea here is that she loves the rabbit. Maybe she's going to want to keep it. Certainly, that's what kids want to do. But here she is going to school. Now, right away on page 66, the first sentence is just, again, brilliant. The author, Cynthia Lord, she does such a great job. School definitely had some fun parts, but it was exhausting. How simple is that to put in a sentence, but it packs so much emotional weight. And also, someone that learns on their own with their parents. So often in schools, we've talked about it so often, the way that they design schools is not ideal. And maybe education will be different as we go into the AI age, but here's what she mentions also, the author, about what Emma's thinking. Just when I was getting into science, it was time to switch to math. If you're learning on your own, ideally you need the time, the space to dive into topics. And that is not conducive to having to do 7 or 8 subjects during a day. And you're always moving. That bell is always ringing in middle school. She also mentioned it was hard to pay attention. She goes into the cafeteria and she was nearly, quote, knocked over by how loud it was. It was like they were saving up all the noise for one moment. Great again. And what they also mention here is that, as I typically do, I like to throw out metaphors with my class and the practice metaphors. And ultimately, when we're walking from special to special, specials are like gym or arts or music. Everyone else in the building is switching and they're moving through the hallway. And ultimately, I'll say to the kids, hey, what's the metaphor here as we're stopping and waiting for a line of kids to go through? Oh, yeah, Mr. O'Keefe. Yeah, it's like Grand Central Station, or it's like we're in a traffic jam. And sure enough, this is exactly what the author wrote. The Lakeview Elementary School cafeteria seemed like a huge kids' traffic jam. And of course, first day of school, she has nowhere to sit. We've all been there. And Leah and Iris, her friends, I don't want to call them friends yet. She's looking for friends. She's looking for them to be friends, but they didn't set aside a seat for her. We do this in our school, and most schools do this. You've got to be proactive with new kids. Whether it's the first day or the middle of the school year, you've got to have a buddy that can bring them, introduce them, stay with them all throughout the day, just to kind of get them acclimated. And kids are kids. They're steadfast, and are resilient. They move on. They'll figure it out. But some kids don't. And yet, this is not what they did. Of course, it makes for a good story, right? But here she is sitting by herself, and she's reminded what their brother had told her the first day is the hardest. The first day is the hardest. And of course, Jack sits down next to her. And this is not what she's looking for. Jack has special needs. We're getting to understand that. And this became a big conversation when in class her apple falls off her tray. And it goes like underneath other people's tables, and she's upset by this and she's concerned about it. And all of a sudden now the apple's being kicked around the cafeteria and the teachers get involved, and it turned out to be nothing, but we all kind of thought, is she going to be pointed out as the person that did this, that she started it, that she really didn't purposely knock the apple off and start kicking it. We also are introduced to this kid, Dustin, that sat down at the table with her and Jack, but clearly she's looking to sit with some of the girls. And on page 71, she's looking over at the girls. She felt like her table were the, quote, leftover table, the leftovers table. Leah and Iris were laughing with the other girls and watching them, quote, I couldn't help wishing I was over there. If you didn't experience this in school, you were lucky. I experienced it, and so often what I ask parents when they come into classroom is to give advice to second graders, and so often what I've preached till the cows come home. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. But it's so hard to be yourself when you're trying to find out who yourself is, who you are, and you want to be others. You're looking at others, and they seem to have everything put together. They seem to be the good-looking ones. They're the ones that are popular, that have all the friends. They're the athletes. You name it, on and on and on. But what you find out is they are just like you. They may have this kind of exterior that looks great and wonderful, but a lot of times what's inside, underneath that exterior, is an interior that's not all sunshine and roses and happiness. Hey, it's a hard lesson to learn. It's tough to be there at that time. And I'll get off my soapbox because, listen, ultimately with years, with age, comes wisdom, and I'm sure all of us could wish that they could go back to that time and not worry about where you're sitting. But this is Emma's life right now, and it's certainly understandable. So the apple, finally a teacher called out, whose apple is this? I opened my mouth. This is what the author wrote. She says, I opened my mouth. This is what Emma's saying. To say it had been an accident, but no words would come out. My heart, quote, my heart tightened, waiting for some kid to point at me. But no one did. Crisis averted. Jack ends up talking to her teacher aide, and the teacher aide, Miss Martell, says, Jack, how was your first day? And he doesn't answer the question. He says, Emma has a rabbit. And then later on he says, silly wabbit, tricks are for kids. Jack is a likable kid, but we learn that he does have special needs. He is autistic. And Mrs. Martell, when he says he didn't answer the question, Mrs. Martell said, Jack, I asked you a question. How has your day been? So Jack is a likable kid, but as we close out the chapter on page 75, Emma is looking for that friend still. This cafeteria experience, day one, did not go well for her, and she says, quote, I don't belong here, unquote. Again, your heart is breaking for her. Now, in terms of commentary, I've said this repeatedly with this story. It gets into ruts too much, nothing is happening, but it keeps me going with simple sentences like this on page 76. She gets off the bus and Mom holds up her phone to take my photo, but, quote, I didn't have any smiles left in me, unquote. I've talked about this on and on and on, but it's great to recognize, and it's important to hold on to great books that are written well. I'd rather have books that are written well, that have less action and adventure. But let's go. Let's go, Mrs. Lord. Let's get something happening with this story. When I say this, what I mean is let's get the plot moving. Let's have something else happening, but we're still here at day one. Yes, we're home from school now, so maybe that's something new. But I will say this. There's more good writing. Emma says, maybe public school isn't for me. And Mom said, wait a minute, you got to, like, I'm sure we're all thinking, it's day one still. You got to give it a chance, Mom said. Wait a minute. She comes back and Mom, I thought you said that it was my choice. Basically, what she's saying is that her mother was disappointed. And hey, if she chooses to come back, her mother's going to be happy and waiting. But no, her mother's being a good mom and basically saying, you can't just give up on something that's new and challenging. That's not good. And then here we go. What happens? This is a great line. She sees Lappy, the rabbit, over in the corner of the room as she's crying and she's upset. And the author writes, quote, there she is, a rotten cherry on an already terrible day, Sunday. Why did she say that? Because she realized in that moment when everything is horrible, she's got to take Lappy to the shelter. They do take her to the shelter, but everything turns out okay. They don't have, like I said before, they don't have any records that someone is looking for a rabbit. So Dad lets her bring Lappy back home. So what happens next? As the ebb and flows of realistic fiction about kids just going through their regular days, she's got a bad day, and now she's getting excited to go back on day 2. Why? Because she's come up with a plan as to what to do with their project. They will make a video. She's thinking she will invite Iris, Leah, and Jack over to her house to see her bunny. Who doesn't like a bunny, she's thinking. And she's right, of course, but is she right about assuming that they're going to want to come over? Now we're into the next chapter. We're on page 92. What I noticed now that I just love is, yes, she puts another rock in her pocket. It's called Keep Going. She's trying to be resolute. She's trying to be tough and strong. And she makes this list about what's going to be easier the second day. I know where my room and desk are. Quote, I know some of the kids' names. Quote, I brought a bag lunch. She's not going to the cafeteria. And obviously, number 4, quote, I have a plan to invite my group to my house. But here's the problem. No one wanted to talk about it right away in the beginning of the day. She wanted to talk about it. She was all over them. And they were like, wait a minute, I just woke up. That didn't go well. The cafeteria didn't go well again on day 2. Listen to this quote, page 95. It's loud. No one's talking to her. Everyone's saying everything except she can't even get a word in edgewise. I never knew you could be surrounded by so many kids and still feel alone. My big takeaway from this book, no doubt, is how simple she can write, put words together that are not detailed at all, but just pack such an emotional punch. I've said it over and over and again, but I just love it. And you just die in sadness for poor Emma. And listen to this. She's got that rock about keep going in her pocket. And she referenced Miss Martell that whenever she wanted Jack to move on to the next thing, like Jack is talking incessantly and you won't get off a topic, Miss Martell makes this little circle spinning motion in the air with her index finger. You can picture that, right? Let's go. Move on, move on. And certainly enough, that's what she found herself. That's what Emma found herself doing when she's trying to talk to herself about, come on, you push through, you can do this, right? The day's not going to be that bad. Keep going, keep your head up. Things will get better. But they're not getting better. As a matter of fact, she goes back to her notebook. She had written things down that would be easier on the second day. She talked about lunch, but no. Author writes, quote, today's lunch was just a different kind of hard. So now they're picking out books in the library, and Jack ends up finding this book, and they start looking it over, and Jack starts talking in his Elmer Fudd voice. Elmer Fudd was the spoiled to Bugs Bunny. You rascally wabbit. Then all of a sudden, the other kids are looking at Jack and Emma. And how about this line? Why is it that when they talk differently, this is what Emma's thinking, it was funny, but when Jack did, it wasn't? So Jack continues to keep talking about all the details about this animal, this Pika, which is interesting. They never mentioned Pikachu, but it's another type of rabbit. And then what's interesting is Emma basically, even though she knew it was rude, she interrupts Jack so he would stop talking, because right now she can sense the girls are not happy with what Jack is doing, and she's got to make a decision, split-second decision. Does she go along with Jack and be kind and listen to him like most people would do? But no, she doesn't have the history with Jack. They do. And they're, I guess, tired of his antics, if that's the right word. Just tired of who he is, which is so sad. But nevertheless, here she is. She stops. And she says to herself, quote, maybe there was a point where being completely yourself stopped being a good thing and just became a lonely thing. Oh, boy. But as Emma relays to herself in her head, she was being truthful to herself. In fact, she was being herself, because you know what? It was rude for her to interrupt Jack, but her way of thinking, you know what? It was rude for Jack to keep going and going. But again, as we know, my younger audience, in case you don't know, one of the issues with some kids on the spectrum, some kids that are autistic, they don't understand social situations. They don't necessarily read emotions in other people's faces. They can't do that. So that's Jack's issue. It's clear that you got to infer right now. So what happens as we wrap up the podcast, as we wrap up this chapter going into page 102? She invites the girls over. But of course, Emma doesn't understand all the difficulties. You can't just invite someone over that morning and expect that the parents will be able to pick you up. You got to have permission slips. You just can't do it on the spot. You know, obviously Emma is navigating a new life and people going to school. And that was her bad. But listen, here's the thing. Iris immediately shot it down. Leah was more understanding. And what happens with Jack? Jack, of course, says yes. He takes charge. He takes out his little cell phone. He says, oh, this is just for emergencies. So as the chapter wraps up, what does Iris say? Iris, who is the one that clearly is in charge, the one that goes overboard, the one that doesn't seem as nice. Leah was apologetic, like I said, but here's what Iris said. Quote, it's too complicated. Let's just work in twos. Me and Leah, you and Jack. Emma wanted to protest. Emma wanted to come back and say no. Emma wanted to disagree. And listen to this. She wanted to say, I want you to meet my pet rabbit, though. But as she relayed in her head, she says to herself, that just sounds pathetic. And in that moment, that split decision, she was right. And here's what the author says as we wrap up this chapter. I could tell that Leah and Iris were getting frustrated with me, Emma relays. Okay, I said gently. Friends, this has been the OK Book Club version of our podcast, OK, Let's Learn. I hope you enjoyed the journey with me. This book, I don't know, it's okay. It's moving, but let's have something happen. Here's what you want to do for the next episode, as I relayed before. The idea is that we read together the book. My plan here is that we're going to have a total of 6 episodes, 5 that'll bring us through the end of the book, and then a final wrap-up episode that'll be a look back on all the highlights, lowlights of the book. So for episode 4, our next episode, you want to read right where we are right now, page 102 through page 148. So again, thanks for reading this book with me. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. Come follow along with us in our Facebook page. That's called OK Let's Learn. It's in the podcast notes here in this episode. And always love those reviews, the 5-star ratings. Thank you. It helps the podcast get out to more and more people. So until next time, have fun and keep learning.